Hi, listeners. Welcome to Grief Out Loud. Remember the last time you tried to talk about grief and suddenly everybody left the room? Grief Out Loud is opening up this often avoided conversation because grief is hard enough without having to go through it alone. We bring you a mix of personal stories, tips for supporting children, teens, and yourself, and interviews with professionals in the grief world. Platitude and cliche-free, we promise. Grief Out Loud is hosted by me, Jana DeCristofaro, and produced by Dougie Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Hey everyone! Before we get to today's episode, I wanted to extend an invitation. I'm working on a new project and would love to hear from those of you who have had someone die of COVID-19. The news is filled with numbers, but we rarely get to hear about the people behind those numbers. If you'd like to learn more, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougie, dougy.org. Okay, so for today's episode, it was really hard to pick just one theme. Our guest, TJ Jackson, was a teenager when his mother Dee Dee was killed in 1994. But this isn't an episode about grieving a violent death. TJ is also part of a well-known family, but it's not an episode just about grieving in the public's eye. This episode is about both of those things, but it's also about so much more. In case you're wondering if TJ's last name is as legendary as it sounds, you are correct. TJ is the son of Tito and nephew to Janet and Michael Jackson. He has an impressive music career of his own as a solo artist and also as part of the band 3T that he has with his brothers Taj and Taryll. TJ and his brothers also created the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation. It's a nonprofit they started in 2015 in memory of their mother. Through their foundation, they provide support and resources for those in grief. Through that work, they've been running music workshops for children and teens, and they also have the Power of Love show, a podcast dedicated to helping people learn more about grief and ways to cope with it. Okay, here's my interview with TJ. TJ, thank you so much for coming on Grief Out Loud. It's just an exciting opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And I know you're usually on the other side of the quote unquote mic of asking the questions from your podcast and show, The Power of Love, which I'm looking forward to being a guest on in the next month. So I really appreciate you, being willing to be the one answering the questions today.
Yeah. Anything to help people, I'm all for it. So it's all good.
When you think about your mom, what do you think of?
I think about a beautiful woman who lived her life for her kids and who made a huge impression on the community that she served. I think of someone who was unique, different, but full of love.
What was different about your mom?
My mom, she's from New York. So, and I grew up, my whole family pretty much settled here in Los Angeles, California. So my mother was born and raised in New York, and she just continued, she had that feistiness, that realness, that grittiness, and never lost it. No matter what setting she was in, that was her. However, there was always this blanket of love around everything she did. So even if she was going to be direct with you, it was coming and you felt it come from a place of love. And she just had this really wonderful ability to do that, because people, I think, naturally respect the truth. And my mother had that, but it was always, people never questioned her intention or the love that was behind her words or actions.
Sort of that compassionate feistiness.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as common as it maybe should be. So it stands out, at least for me. I don't, I lost. I had just turned 16 when my mother was murdered, so I don't have a complete picture of who my mother was. When you're a kid, you see it one way, but still, she made a huge impression on me that I've had that my entire life and will always have. And I haven't seen that kind of great combination in anyone else.
And so you were 16 when she died, and like you said, you had kind of a unlimited time with her to know her from a teen perspective or from a child perspective, and that grief as well can be so different over time. And so, just wondering, what do you remember about how grief felt when you were a teen versus how maybe it shows up in your life today?
Yeah, what was so strange with when I lost my mother was I was having, it seemed like foreshadowing events that something drastic was going to change my world prior to my mother's death. You would hear stories about someone losing a brother or a child, or just maybe it was a movie, and it would stick and hit a little bit harder. So when the day did come when I lost my mother, it was one of those things where I had kind of already, I don't want to say expected it, but it was one of those where it's like, it's my turn to deal with this. As much as it was a surprise, because of that, I felt like a little bit expecting something drastic was going to change. So when it happened, being 16, my first initial response was to carry on in my world. I remember going for my mother, scheduling my orthodontist appointments and taking me having to schedule and take my own myself. So I had to grow up, seemed like overnight once she passed. And because of that, and I think because of the love I got from my family and close friends, my grieving process was a bit different. It was very hot and cold. It was, days where obviously I missed my mother tremendously, but days where I felt so busy that I was just moving. Truthfully, it wasn't till I had my first son 5 years later at 21 that it really hit me that my son's was robbed of having an amazing grandmother. And who do I go to answer some of these questions? Because my mother was the answer. She was, and that's when it slowed down for me, actually, that I didn't have my mother anymore. I mean, I obviously knew it when it happened, but that's when it really slowed down, and it became an every minute type of thing. Was when I first had my son. It just it got real on me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk often about how when people hit different life stages or milestones, that the loss, the absence of that person, the absence of the role of that person sinks in a new way. And I appreciated too what you were saying of like, you're grieving your mother as a parent, but also grieving for your son who's not going to get to know your mother as this amazing grandmother.
Yeah. And that's a continued theme. When my son and my daughter, who I named after my mother, with the rest of the kids that have come after my son, it's a continued thing. So it's a constant reminder. When my son had his first birthday, seeing all my family and familiar faces, and the one face that I know would have been happier than any isn't there. And when my son, turned 10, double digits, or when he got in trouble in middle school or high school, they were, I, that's when I kind of realized, and I continue to realize that I and he are missing a huge piece to our a little family. And I just want to clarify one thing that, I don't want people to think that, when I graduated high school at 17, I don't want people to think it was an easy graduation or an easy process. I just think I was kind of mentally prepared for the fact that it would be hard because my mother wasn't there. It seems like the moments when you aren't expecting it, it hits you harder. And when my son was born, the minute he was born or the day he wasn't born, I didn't think my mind would go there, but it did.
Mm.
And I think that's when it hit me, or at least had a more deep effect.
So, as an adult and as a parent with grief showing up in new and different and meaningful ways, what did you turn to for support, for guidance, for help in that new kind of phase and realm of grief?
Really thoughts. I'm a songwriter, so just writing out my emotions, singing, sports, staying busy. I think what what I am fortunate to have done and what I continue to do is I try to stay busy. I don't try to let it hit me too hard in terms of getting too, I try to continue on in life. I try to have a positive mindset. I've read a book called Embraced by the Light that really, helped me, because I like to think that I like to help people and I like to think that I want the best for people. And when my mother, when she was murdered, she was going through, I think, a challenging time in her life. She had just been divorced. She was stressed out. There was all different types of issues. So, in my viewpoint, whether it's wrong or right, the her last year was a tough year for her. So in a way, it's that book that painted the passing from life to death in a more positive, upbeat way, really helped me come to terms and I don't want to say be okay, but as much as possible, feel more comfort in knowing that she's in a better place kind of vibe. That's what I turn to when things are harder, when even with the loss of my Uncle Michael, it was like maybe he's in a more peaceful place. And it wasn't like I doubt it. Now it was more, I have more conviction that he is. So for me, it just changed my whole mindset of life and the whole process of birth, life, and death, which I think has helped me a lot.
I was having a conversation recently with some folks from Dougie Center about this idea of when someone dies, we miss them. And oftentimes we're also worried about them or conflicted about them or concerned about the circumstances that maybe happened towards the end of their life or where are they now. And that sometimes when we find some peace of mind around those aspects, it opens more space to just miss them and not be
Mm.
so torn up about the circumstances or where they are now or if they're okay.
I think that's right on. I think I agree with that. I was and still am a big reader, and I remember being 16 and I just got my driver's license. My last photo with my mother is us at my, the DMV, me passing my driver's test. And when she passed, I used to go to the local Barnes and Noble to try to find a book. This is before the internet, of course. So I needed to find some type of resource that I can learn on to figure out what happened and where she is. And I've always had a decent, religious base. But I needed more. I needed a bit more answer. I needed more detailed, more tangible, a more tangible idea of where mom is. And I read several books and really none of them really hit me at the time until I read that one, Embraced by the Light. And like I said, it just really helped me. I felt like I can smile again, knowing mom's okay, or knowing mom's in a good place. And again, I think I was just I was reaching for something, and the book provided it for me. And that is a big reason why I'm happy with what my brothers and I started with the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation and what we do. Because I felt like there was a lack of resources at that time to help people get through the situation. You'll never get over it, but just learning how to deal with it and to navigate through it. That's why I'm so happy with what we do and what you're doing and what so many are now doing, is because I think this is a huge resource for those who may be going through it.
Yeah, to ensure that people aren't having to figure it out quite so much on their own as you were
Yeah.
as a teen driving to Barnes and Noble looking for some sort of resource and support. And so you've mentioned, the foundation that you and your brother started, the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation, in honor of your mom. And could you talk a little more about the foundation's mission and how did the three of you come together to agree on doing this, knowing that everyone grieves so differently?
Yeah. I think we come from, we're from the Jackson family. And one thing besides music that, we seem to always see around our family is some type of charity. I remember so clearly going to, my Uncle Michael's shows in different countries. And straight from the show, we'd go to a hospital, or before a show, we'd go, feed kids or whatever it was, or give things to homeless. I saw that every day of my life. And even with my brothers and I, we have a music group, and we did our thing, and did that kind of stuff as well. But then there became a time where a 5, 6 year period where we weren't doing so much charitable stuff in the way we felt we should. And so I think I knew, and my brothers knew, and it just came together that we needed to start something in honor of our mother. We had a show on Lifetime called Jackson's Next Generation, and my eldest brother didn't have a storyline, and that what became his storyline, and that was officially the launch of the foundation. In terms of what the purpose is, it was similar to what I've been saying, is to let people know that they're not alone in their grief, to just try to be a source for people who may need it. We really wanted to help those, especially the youth that may be dealing with loss, because sometimes it feels like, although there's programs for them, there's not a true understanding of what they may be going through. And because we were all young when it happened to us, we felt maybe that was kind of our way of really connecting and really making a difference, because we had went through it. So that's what we try to do. We try to help, at this point it's now everyone, but in terms of programs, we try to do programs for the youth that may be dealing with significant loss. And it's not just death. It could be loss of a home, it could be loss of from a fire. It could be any type of significant loss that can change the course of their life. We try to provide some type of quote unquote therapy for them. And we, as musicians, decided to use music. It's a very safe way to open up without kids realizing they're opening up, or to expressing themselves. Everyone loves music, so that's what we do. We have a program called Music Heals, and then we do our weekly shows, kind of like this show, where we talk all about grief, and trying to make it more familiar for the world, because we, as I always say, the world loves to celebrate winners. After the Super Bowl, the champions going to Disneyland, and the cameras are all on the winning team, but we forget about the losers and what they may be going through. And it's just something I think society does. We always want to be winners, but losing is part of life, and we're all going to lose. That's just life. It's just, I think our society doesn't do a good enough job shining a light on it, and understanding what the emotions are that come with loss. We just want to do our part in helping people get more familiar with loss. And we try to do it in an upbeat, fun way, so it doesn't seem so depressing, because loss isn't easy, but it's part of our lives.
With your Music Heals program, I imagine that's like going out to groups of kids and engaging with them with music, and reaching out to kids who have had losses apart from necessarily having someone in their life die. And I think how relevant in the last 2.5 years with the COVID pandemic of so much loss that are maybe not as tangible or noticed or acknowledged. And I'm wondering, how did you all have to shift your programming during COVID? Because I think of being out with groups of kids and music, like that seems like such an in-person thing to do.
Yeah, it was challenging. Like everything, it seems like our world changed since COVID hit. What we did is, as you said, before COVID, and now we're getting back into it, was in person, like kind of like, I don't want to say classes, but there are music get-togethers. We brought a lot of instruments in. The kids would play instruments. We just jam for a bit, and then we'd pass out papers, and we'd write a song together. Each kid would contribute a line, and it was always with some fun, and I love that line, so the kid would feel good. But once COVID hit, it did get challenging because it had to go virtual. And in a way, obviously feel in-person classes were more effective, because you get to, as instructors, you get to also see exactly what kids are going through, where in Zooms, the mic or the camera, you can only really focus on one thing at a time, or whoever's talking. But at the same time, I think it allowed some kids to open up, because it felt like, not as much pressure for some reason, or at least the kids felt that. So it had its pros as well, but there's nothing like being in person. And as we are coming out well, as we deal with this coming out of the pandemic, we have slowly gotten back into our in-person classes, and it's been wonderful.
TJ, you mentioned, being part of the Jackson family and your uncle Michael dying and your mom. And I mean, you were grieving personal losses, but as part of such a public family. And I wonder what role that played in your grief.
I think in my mother's case, I remember when my mother died, it was all over the news. It was like on hard copy and Access Hollywood and, Entertainment Tonight, and of course the regular news as well. But because of the way she lost her life, it became intriguing for the public, and because of who we are as a family. So it was one of those things where nightly they would talk about it and this new evidence and this. So my family, I give them credit. They recognized that pretty early on what the news was going to do and what spectacle it would become, and they shielded us from it. They kept us busy with, my brothers and I were very into our sports. We were very busy with our recording career, so we just kept busy. And then, after a year's time, it kind of died down. And now you don't really hear much about it. Maybe once every year or so, you'll hear about a YouTuber who did a special on my mother's passing, or something of that. But it's not an everyday thing. In the case of my Uncle Michael, it's an everyday thing. You'll hear his song, or I was just at a volleyball tournament, and some kid was waiting for the other team to take the court, and he was talking with his friend and they were laughing, and I was watching the interaction, and then the kid just started doing the moonwalk, and it's like I could have never predicted 2 seconds earlier that something would quickly remind me of my Uncle Michael. And there it goes, or someone's wearing a shirt that has his face on it. So it's a constant reminder of the loss. And for the first 5, 6 years after he had passed, it was a tough challenge for me because I would find myself falling back into this kind of down state of mind. But my brother, he changed my mindset, and thinking of, they're celebrating him, they're acknowledging him, they're proud of him. And that's what my uncle would he be so happy to see people get satisfaction because of him, and that's helped me. So even though there's times where it can get tough, for the most part, Halloween Thriller always plays. It becomes a proud thing, and it's different. I know 99% of people don't have to go through that, don't experience that, but it's my life, and it's the way it's always been. My life has always been a bit different, and this is just another reason on why it's different.
I've been interviewed a few times on why and how teens and young adults are affected by the deaths of celebrities that they didn't know in person. After Kobe Bryant died, when Juice World died, there's a lot of focus on like, why? Why are teens having such a big reaction to this? And is it good? Is it bad? How do we support them? And just wondering what kind of your thoughts are on people grieving for celebrities like your uncle who never knew him.
Yeah, and we've done shows on this exact question. It's a great question because it's a true thing, and there's fans every day that reach out to me, DM me on my social media, talking about that. That they miss my uncle, and they name their kid after him, or whatever. And the closest thing I can kind of relate to is Kobe's passing. I met Kobe a couple of times, had some great interactions, but I wouldn't say we were friends or anything. But when he passed, to me, it was a similar way of how my uncle passed, where it was very unexpected. It was one of those things you couldn't believe it. And in my case, it was literally down the street. I mean, I could look outside my balcony and see the smoke and see the news helicopters hovering. So it brought me back to my uncle's, because after he passed, we all went to the family residence and there's helicopters around us. So there's that combination where it felt very similar, but the difference was I didn't have that personal, strong connection like I did with my uncle. But Kobe being the same age I am and me being a huge basketball fan, it hit me so hard. And prior to that, I couldn't really understand or relate to mourning the death of a celebrity until Kobe. And it still hits me. It still saddens me tremendously. It's still hard for me. And I think about his kids, his wife, and what they are going through because I kind of know, or at least to say, I have an idea from dealing it with my uncle. You know, his daughters are going to have to deal with all the different emotions when they see a young kid just wearing a jersey, a Kobe jersey, who's buying an ice cream or whatever, who has no idea that impact is going to be had on kin. But it's a true thing, and it's something that I can't articulate, but it's something that I feel for them because I know what that's like. You know, watching a basketball game or driving by the Staples Center, those are constant reminders of their loss, of their father that we sometimes in the, regular people don't really understand. But celebrities are part of our world. You know that they are a source of comfort, source of joy. Kobe, there's millions of Laker fans that Kobe gave them amazing moments. They where people were jumping as high as they can because he made a basket. Those are emotions that you can't hide and don't forget. And I think that's why when we lose a celebrity, it hits us as well because they brought so much joy and happiness and meaning to our lives that when we lose them, it's difficult.
So, in your work with the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation, with your Power of Love show, interviewing people, talking about grief, kind of having it be part of your day to day life, I'm wondering, is there anything that you've learned recently that helps you better understand your 16-year-old self?
There's a couple things that again I feel fortunate that I was just doing, staying busy. I had a dog who was so important. We didn't do therapy, we didn't go to therapy, I should say. I think there at that time there was so much going on with my family in the public eye that there was this fear of opening up completely. That we didn't know if we could trust everyone, so we didn't really go down that route. But looking back, I don't feel I feel fortunate that I had my dog, and it was my dog because for me, I just needed to express myself. I needed something to hug that can love me unconditionally when I needed it. And my dog played that role. Another thing is people grieve differently. Some people will cry every day. Some people won't cry. Some people can laugh. Some people can smile. Some people can't for a little while. I never was the kind of person that would judge my brothers on how they were responding or what they were doing, and vice versa. And then just getting out with nature. I remember right after my mother passed, prior to the funeral, we went to my Aunt Janet's house in Malibu, and she lived on the beach. And we stayed with her for several days. And that was very therapeutic without realizing it. We would hear the waves or see the ocean or walk on the beach at night, not realizing that was healing for me. So those are the kind of things that I'm learning about from the experts and from people that I just fortunately did. So, and I think that's why I've been able to get through the loss of my beloved mother as well as I have. I feel a lot of it is because I was grieving pretty well or going through the process pretty well without really realizing it.
It goes back to this idea of, we're all our own wisest counsel when it comes to our specific grief, and that there's a lot of things that can get in the way of us being able to access that knowing. And if we have
Hmm.
like the space and the support and the resources available, we can often find our way into what's going to be most supportive. But a lot of times it gets kind of offloaded to maybe to like outside experts of like, what should I do? And so it's just interesting to hear you say, like, now that I talk to the people who I might have turned to, who say nature and connection with animals and music and physical expression and creativity, you're like, oh, I actually naturally did all those things.
Yeah, and touch as well. My family. I have a big family and friends and who believe in love and who gave hugs. I've said this before. The single most important hug I've ever received was from my Uncle Jermaine. After we went to the hospital and, where they told us we lost our mother, she was no longer with us. We came back to the house, and my Uncle Jermaine was the first family member I had saw since learning and now realizing I lost my mother. My father lived several hours away, so it took him a while to get to us. But I remember so vividly and clearly thinking, what's the purpose of everything? This is just too much. I don't like this. And then my Uncle Jermaine gave me, it felt like a minute long hug, a strong, tight hug. And that was the first time I had cried since hearing about my mother, rubbing my back, and just the love behind the hug did so much for me. It told me I will be okay, and that it's okay to cry, and that I have family that will be there to support me and to catch me. And I tell them that to this day. I mean, I tell them that I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but I tell them that you don't understand. You have no idea how important that hug was for me. I'll always be thankful for it.
Well, the name of your show, then, The Power of Love, seems to have even more poignancy in this
Yeah,
moment of like that's what you and your family are trying to do, is to provide that power of love to folks who are tuning into your show.
100%. In our community we built is love, and people are supporting each other. I think sometimes, the word love can become a cliche or used in it has different meanings in the English language. But just the feeling of support, being there for people and having a deep care for them, that's a powerful thing that I think oftentimes we forget. I think a lot of times we associate love with, marriage, or, you want to be with someone, but it goes beyond that. You can love a friend, you can love, even, I truly believe you can love a stranger. If you have true love for people and you care about people, that's a powerful thing.
So, for listeners who want to connect with you and with your work with the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation and your show, The Power of Love, like I'm sure you're everywhere, but what are some of the places that people can find you?
Exactly like you said, everywhere. You can go on our website, that's the central point where it could point you to our YouTube channel, Instagram links, and to explain more of what we do. And even on the podcast, The Power of Love Show. If you like to listen to podcasts on Apple or Google or Spotify, we're on all those. Just look it up: DEE space Jackson's Foundation, and the show's called Power of Love. And my brothers and I, we're 3 years in, so there's over 150 episodes on different topics and different with people who've lost in different ways, with experts. Where some shows are just us, where we're going through tips for avoiding grief, or tips to stop avoiding grief. I'm sorry. And it's just been a very healing process for us, and we didn't realize it, but that's been our weekly therapy, is doing the show. And I think it's just super important, as I said earlier, to continue to respect that you're gonna have to deal with loss at some point in your life. And if you can prepare for it and be prepared for it, you very well may be able to navigate through it. And I've seen far too many people just throw away or go downhill after a significant loss. And I can understand partially why that's the case, but I just wish there was a further understanding and a better job done from our society to explain that it's okay to grieve in your own way. And there's tools out there that can help you. I think that's where we're dropping the ball as a society, and that's what our show and our foundation tries to do.
Well, I appreciate so much that the work that you and your brothers are doing and for taking time to be part of Grief Out Loud today. And I'm looking forward to being on your show in a few weeks. So thank you for your time today, TJ.
Awesome, Jana. Thank you.
And listeners, I'll put links to all of the ways to connect with TJ and the Power of Love show and their foundation in our show notes, as always. And grateful for each of you for tuning in, for listening, for making the show mean what it does. Special request to any of our listeners who are outside of the United States. If you're tuning in from a different country, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me directly at griefoutloud@dougy.org. That's DOUGY.org. That's also our website where you can find out more information about our local programs, about our free downloadable resources, and all of the past episodes of Grief Out Loud. So thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.